Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started, and if we have some folks come in, that'll be fine. My name is Pam Pope, and with me today is Roland Mosey, and we both work for the Human Resources Services Division, myself in St. Louis and Roland here in College Park. And we're here to talk with you today about hiring reform and how it's affected the hiring process at NARA. We're also going to have a demonstration of the USA Staffing automated system. But before we get started, Annalisa Archer, the Director of Human Resources, has a few words regarding hiring reform that she would like to share with you. And we're going to watch a brief video that will essentially set the stage for our briefing this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Annalisa Archer, Director of NARA's Human Resources Services Division, and I'd like to share with you some exciting things that are happening to reform NARA's hiring process. Reforming the federal hiring process is a key goal of the Obama administration, and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, has been tasked with overseeing this effort across the government. OPM is the agency that sets federal personnel policy and oversees federal personnel administration in all federal agencies. In a nutshell, the President and OPM have directed federal agencies to make the federal hiring process faster, simpler, and more user-friendly. Personally, I'm very excited about this initiative. Throughout my career, I can recall many late nights struggling to complete KSA narratives and other application requirements in response to vacancy announcements, only to wait weeks or even months to hear anything back from a federal agency with a response. And as a manager, I've experienced the difficulty of recruiting high-quality candidates to federal jobs only to lose them to competitors because the federal hiring process takes so long. So, what is NARA doing to change all that? First and foremost, we are fully automating the application process by having all applicants apply for jobs using a tool called USA Staffing. You will be learning more about this system in the coming weeks as we roll out a comprehensive training program to employees and hiring managers across NARA locations. To give you a preview, under this new system, applicants will no longer be required to produce KSA narratives. Instead, they will be asked to reply to straightforward occupational questionnaires. Applicants will receive instant acknowledgement of the receipt of their application and will also be able to receive online updates of the status of their application. In addition, we expect that this tool will dramatically reduce the time it takes to fill positions at NARA. OPM has set a goal for federal agencies to fill positions within 80 days. Prior to implementing USA Staffing, NARA's average was more than double that, 163 to 213 days on average. Our initial results using USA Staffing have been quite positive. At last count, our time to fill was already reduced to 118 days, and we expect even more improvement as we move forward with these initiatives. What else is NARA doing to improve the federal hiring process? We are exploring new ways to assess applicants for NARA positions. The occupational questionnaires in USA Staffing are a great first step, but we're also exploring other tools like structured interviews, writing assessments for jobs that require writing skill, and work simulation exercises that will enable applicants to demonstrate their experience performing actual tasks required for the job in a simulated environment. And finally, we are working hard within HR to become a model for hiring process efficiency and customer service among small agencies. We are streamlining our internal work processes and eliminating procedures that are redundant or have low return on investment. We've provided customer service training to all HR staff and are seeking customer feedback in new and different ways. And we've established formal performance metrics to measure our accomplishment in achieving hiring reform results. I look forward to sharing additional information with you about NARA's hiring reform efforts in the coming months, and I really look forward to receiving your feedback and your observations as we move forward. To see the latest on hiring reform news, check out the hiring reform webpage on NARA at Work. And to communicate with me about your observations and thoughts, send me an email at humancapital@nara.gov. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
Okay, well, we've just heard from Annalisa about several initiatives taking place across the federal government to make the hiring process faster, simpler, and more user-friendly. So in this presentation, we're going to focus on NAH's #1 agenda of hiring reform, which is automating the application and hiring process. And this briefing is going to address the following questions. What's changing? What's staying the same? What does the new process look like? And how will we ensure it's working? First of all, under what's changing, applicants are no longer going to have to provide those lengthy narrative descriptions of experience as it relates to the knowledges, skills, and abilities that have been listed in a vacancy announcement. Instead, you're going to respond to an occupational questionnaire. This could be a multiple choice and combined with yes/no response questions. You may be asked to provide some brief mini narratives in response to a few of these questions. And these are essentially that, mini narratives, something that's maybe a short paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences long, that provides examples or supports the response that you gave in response to that particular question. Now, the vacancy announcement is still going to list the knowledge, skills, and abilities required, because it's going to tell you that that's what the occupational questionnaire is going to measure you on. The new process is designed to be completed entirely online. When you submit your application, you're going to receive a confirmation of submission message so that you know your application has been received. And throughout the process, you're going to receive periodic updates online as to the status of your application. And managers are even going to be able to receive referral lists and application packages online. So the HR specialists are no longer going to be reviewing those lengthy paper application packages. The system is going to score applicants based on their response to the occupational questionnaire. This essentially eliminates the need for hiring managers and subject matter experts to serve on those rating and ranking panels. And if any of you have served on these panels, you would know from experience that depending on the number of applications that are received and are rated eligible, you could be spending from several days to sometimes a couple of weeks evaluating those application packages against the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for the job and assigning point levels to those KSAs. Certificates can be issued in as few as 5 days with the new system compared to 33 days under our traditional paper-based process. Right now, we're running about an average of 8 days to issue a referral list, but we have done them in fewer than 5 days. Okay. And these pictures essentially represent the before and after in NAHO. With our paper-based processes, in 2009, we generated 59 FRC cubic boxes of staffing files, with a case file consisting of everything from the vacancy announcement and the position description and the rating guide through all the applications and all the rating materials of those applications, the referral lists, copies of all the letters that were sent to applicants. And on the right side, the after is essentially showing a much cleaner office because the majority of the files are going to be kept in the computer. Everything will be stored in the computer, and we'll probably have a case file probably about this thick. Okay, the second biggest change of hiring reform is category rating. Hiring reform is mandating the use of category rating in the recruitment process when we're recruiting from outside the federal government. Those public notice announcements, which will say in the area of consideration, open to U.S. citizens. Category rating is not new. It was introduced in approximately 2003 and NARA immediately incorporated category rating into our processes and procedures. This is one of the areas of hiring reform that we were ahead of the curve. What's new for us is incorporating this into an automated environment, and USA Staffing is engineered to make use of category rating. In category rating, qualified candidates are assigned to one of three quality categories: best qualified, well qualified, or qualified, based on the responses received on the occupational questionnaire. Now, on the traditional system of the rule of three, in the past, managers were often limited to making a selection from the top three qualified and available candidates. This also included making a selection without bypassing an individual with veterans preference to select an individual without veterans preference. Now, veterans preference still applies to category rating. However, under the old system, candidate was evaluated against the crediting plan, assigned a score. The score was transmuted to a score between 70 and 100, and veterans preference points were then added on to the applicant's score, and the candidates were listed in score and veterans preference order. Under category rating, there are no additional points that are added to anyone's score, but individuals that have veterans preference that are in the best qualified group are actually listed on the certificate ahead of individuals who do not have veterans preference. So veterans preference provisions are still maintained under category rating. The end result of using category rating is that typically more candidates are referred to the hiring manager. So the manager has more candidates to select from, and more candidates have an opportunity to be selected. Announcements are still posted on USA Jobs. They're also available on NARA at Work and archives.gov. Minimum posting periods are the same. For a bargaining unit position, the minimum open period for an announcement is 10 working days. For a non-bargaining unit position, the minimum open period is 5 days. Hiring managers can choose to extend those for longer periods, but those are the minimums. No changes have been needed in current Title V regulations to implement the changes in hiring reform, and merit system principles still apply to all hiring actions. And as I indicated earlier, veterans preference still applies to those public notice recruiting actions. Veterans preference does not apply to actions where we're recruiting under merit promotion procedures. HR specialists will work with the hiring managers to conduct a job analysis prior to each posting to identify the skills and competencies that are required for the position. And this is why it's critical to the recruiting process that we have hiring managers involved up front and throughout the process, because these managers and subject matter experts are going to be helping with the job analysis, they're going to be helping develop the assessment tool, and also crafting language for the vacancy announcement to best market the position. And hiring managers will still be responsible for conducting interviews and making selections. As far as qualification requirements, there are no changes in the qualification requirements at this time. If you're applying for a position, each vacancy announcement will list the qualifications, whether it be specialized experience, education, or a combination of the two. So this is why the resume is very important in the application process. Even though the occupational questionnaire, as you'll see, will become very important, the questionnaire and the responses that you give to the questionnaire are supporting your resume. Your resume is the document that's going to be reviewed to determine if you meet the qualification requirements for the position that you've applied for. Okay. And this chart, next chart, thank you. This chart represents the steps in the hiring process, starting with the time the hiring manager submits a request to fill a position and concluding with the HR specialist making a job offer to the selected candidate and notifying all the candidates of the outcome of the recruiting process. And as you can see by our color codes, little to no change in the requirements for submitting a request for personnel action SF-52 to start the hiring process, classifying a position, or conducting the job analysis and posting the announcement. Whereas in developing the assessment, applying for a position, reviewing applications, and issuing a certificate of eligibles to the hiring manager, there are significant changes in the process. And we're going to talk about these steps and the changes in the process in the next slides. So as I said, to begin the process, I think as most hiring managers know, you need to submit an SF-52 request for personnel action. No change in your internal routing of SF-52s. The majority of them are required to go through the office head for approval and through budget as well. And any position that we're advertising must first be classified, and positions are classified according to classification standards published by the Office of Personnel Management. And again, hiring managers and the HR specialists are going to identify the duties of the position and the skills and competencies required to perform those duties. And this process is known as job analysis. We have one of the job analysis here on the form. We couldn't get the whole form on here, but essentially the first step of a job analysis is to identify the major duties of the job, which essentially comes from the position description. And then to break those duties down into the major tasks that are performed, we then ask the manager to estimate the approximate time spent on those tasks. And then in this column are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are generally listed below here to show the correlation between them and the tasks, which knowledge, skills, and abilities are required to perform these tasks. And those are the skills and competencies that we'll be evaluating during the assessment part. Next slide, please. Okay. In developing the assessment tool, the occupational questionnaire, by which applicants will be evaluated, is where the first major change in the hiring process occurs. Occupational questionnaires are going to replace the crediting plans and rating guides that we've used under our old paper-based process. And the HR specialist is going to work with the hiring manager to develop the questionnaire. They're essentially going to start with any existing job analysis, crediting plans, rating guides, and of course the position description that they already have to develop a questionnaire. That'll be a starting point for them. The next step will be that their questionnaire, the draft, will be reviewed by an industrial organizational psychologist that NAH has added to the staff. This individual specializes in assessment development, such as occupational questionnaires, structured interviews, the physical abilities test that's being rolled out in the record centers right now. So this individual will be reviewing these assessments before they're sent to the hiring manager and making any comments, suggestions for change. They'll be looking at all the documents to see if maybe something needs to be beefed up a little bit, or if they think the questions maybe are too complex for the grade level of the position being filled. And after that's been done, the HR specialist is going to consult the hiring manager in the review of the occupational questionnaire. And this is the hiring manager's opportunity to let us know if we're on target with that occupational questionnaire, if it's measuring the skills and competencies that are really required for the position, and or if there are additional questions that need to be asked to evaluate the candidates. And the questionnaire itself consists of questions that are used to determine minimum qualifications of candidates, as well as the questions and task statements that are used to evaluate applicants against the skills and competencies. This is a Word version of an assessment, and as you'll see, the first questions deal with the minimum qualifications. Now, there may be 1, 2, or more questions that we have to ask to evaluate candidates to make sure they meet the minimum qualifications for the job. And this could be because the job requires a certain amount of education or type of education. In addition, it may require a certain amount of experience. And so we may have 2 questions to evaluate those. If we're recruiting at more than 1 grade level, we're going to have questions that address minimum qualifications at each grade level. If it's a merit promotion announcement, we're also going to have questions that address the time and grade requirement. There will also be questions that address the area of consideration, such as if it's a NARA-only announcement, we'll be asking questions to determine if NARA employees are eligible to apply for the announcement, because you do have to hold a permanent position to apply for a merit promotion announcement. If it's a merit promotion announcement where we're recruiting outside of NARA but to other federal employees, there will be questions to address that, as well as questions to identify applicants that might be eligible under a special appointing authority, such as the Veterans Readjustment Appointment or the Disabilities Program. Those will fall under the area of consideration questions. Those will be followed by questions that are developed that are tied to the skills and competencies of the job. Now, as an applicant, you won't see all these factors and headings when you're completing the occupational questionnaire, but all of the questions that are in the questionnaire are tied to a skill or competency that's required for the job. Okay. Now, the HR specialist is going to develop the announcement in USA Staffing, and it's going to be uploaded onto USA Jobs. It's also going to be posted on NARA at Work and archives.gov. We have administrative points of contact in each of the offices who receive an email from the HR specialist whenever an announcement's been posted, and they're responsible for routing or posting those announcements so that employees that do not have access to a computer will be able to see the announcements. Now, our goal is for everyone to apply online. However, if you're not able to submit all of your documents online, let's say, for example, you have a resume uploaded and you're able to complete the online questionnaire, but maybe you don't have your standard Form 50 notification of personnel action scanned in, or maybe you don't have your DD 214 discharge papers scanned in. There is an option available that you could do part of the process online and fax those additional documents, and there are instructions in the vacancy announcement to do that. Now, when you're faxing those documents, those are not coming to NAH or NAHO in St. Louis. Those documents are going to OPM in Macon, Georgia, and they are scanning those documents in and uploading it into the USA Staffing system. So we would ask that you not bring any paper applications to NAH or mail them to NAHO, because we honestly can't do anything with those application packages. We do not have that capability to scan in those applications and marry them up in the system. OPM does that, and each announcement will include instructions for how you can apply by fax if you're not able to apply online. Okay. You still be able to conduct searches for NARA jobs on USA Jobs, which is the official job site for the federal government. But what happens next in the application processes is where the major change for NARA occurs. And I'm going to turn the briefing over at this point to Roland Mosey, our USA Staffing Systems Manager, and he's going to talk about that.
Great. Good afternoon. Okay, I'm Roland Mosey. I am a Human Resources Specialist, and I am the USA Staffing Systems Manager. What I want to do today is take you through this tutorial, which is going to actually show you what the new process looks like for applying for jobs at NARA. And just as the director mentioned in the video, we did purchase a new system. It's called USA Staffing / Application Manager. And this system is used for collecting resumes, collecting online questionnaires. It has a lot of different capabilities, and we purchased this just so we can get in line with hiring reform. So I'm going to take you through this process, the tutorial, which is actually going to demonstrate to you the transition from USA Jobs to USA Staffing Application Manager. Next slide. With any new system, well, before I start that, let me just find out from you, how many of you have used USA Jobs for applying for jobs? Great. Okay. Then pretty much you guys are familiar with the process, which requires you to go through to apply for a job. And again, what I want to do is just show you what the differences are from applying for the job, going through USA Jobs, going into the new system, USA Staffing Application Manager. Like any new system, you have to start off with an account. So you must start off by creating your account in USA Jobs, which is the bulletin board for the federal government for posting jobs. And to start this account process, you have to sign in or create an account. So you must click this button here. Next slide. So in order to get this process started, you have to put in some information. And basically this first screen here, you got a bunch of asterisks, which are the required fields for you to fill in, such as your name, your address, your city, your state, your phone number. And most important for us is this email. We need your email in the system because this is the way that the HR specialist is going to communicate with you. We're not going to be sending out letters in the mail saying, hey, we got your application, hey, you were referred for this job, or no, you didn't meet the qualifications for a job. We're going to be doing that through email. This is part of the hiring reform requirements for us, is that we actually have 4 points in the process that we have to notify all applicants of the status of their application. So we can't do that unless we have your good email address. In addition, you have to fulfill the requirement for creating a username and a password. So once you got that basic information filled out, you get to this page here, which you can actually create a resume or upload a resume into USA Jobs. A good feature for USA Jobs is that they actually allow you to upload up to 5 resumes. I mean, it's a good feature to have. I mean, personally, I have 2 resumes out there. One as an HR specialist and one for applying for jobs in other categories such as management and program analyst. Once you get accustomed to the system and the functionality, it's probably a good idea to have more than one. In addition, the system can upload other documents, such as the required documents that we require, such as your DD-214s, Standard Form 50s. Those are your notification of personnel actions. We like to have those documents, such as your last promotion 50, your last whiffing grade 50. These items help us, HR, to help sort of verify certain things that you actually have time and grade at a certain grade level. In addition, this screen here allows you to check the application status, and this is sort of where we're going to have all of the applicants referred back to. Once you complete your application, you must come back. You don't have to, but we are directing you to come back to this feature here to check the status of your application. Okay, next slide. So once you got your account created and you start searching the system for a job that you wanted to apply for, you're going to go into the How to Apply section up here, and you're going to come across the Apply Online button, which you see there. This button here is on this navigation bar, will always be there, regardless of what section of the system that you're in. So once you're actually getting ready to apply for the job, you've reviewed all the qualification requirements, and you're ready to go and apply for it, you just hit this button, Apply Online. Next one. Once you hit that button, you come to the next screen where it's actually going to prompt you to select the resume that you want to use. And again, if you have more than one resume, make sure you select the correct resume. And also, it's going to ask you to select any of the additional documents that you have uploaded, such as your DD-214 and any of those 50s that we're asking you for. And then once you get ready to hit the button, you actually have this button here that OPM installed. It's sort of a disclaimer box. OPM is asking that you certify that all the information that you're putting into the system is true, accurate, and it is yours. So you have to hit this certification box before you can continue on. And once you actually certify that all that information that you're putting in the system is true and is yours, you can go ahead and hit this button, Apply for this position now. And as most of you know, once you hit that button, you're starting to transition from USA Jobs. You're leaving USA Jobs, going into NARA's new staffing automated system, which is now Application Manager. Okay, next slide for me. Now, what USA Staffing Application Manager can do for you, just like USA Jobs in a way, you can work on, submit, and track your application package. You can check the status of each application package. You can use the application package checklist to track all of your applicant requirements. You can view and print your assessment questionnaire, which is the most important part of this system. Once you submit your application, do all the questionnaire, and you submit it, you can come back to it and get a list of all the responses that you indicated in this questionnaire. Next slide. Just like any new system, you have a banner page that has a username and a password. So if you actually have one and you've already created an account, you do not have to create one again. What happens with USA Jobs and USA Staffing, they're synced up. So once you leave USA Jobs and come into Application Manager, you won't see this home banner page. You're going to go directly to the questionnaire. But for first-time users, you have to create an account. Next slide. For the first-time user, what the system wants to do is they want to verify that you do not have an existing account in the system. So what they do is ask that you indicate your email address here to check for any existing accounts. And this is for pretty much only the first-time user. And once you do this and you went through all the verification and check, you can go ahead and hit the I am done checking for accounts, and then it will take you to the next page. This next page is really important because now we're asking you to indicate what your Social Security number is and your name. It's important that you actually put in the correct SSN, because if you do not, it's going to affect the way that you apply for that current job and any future job. What happens is if we get the social that's different from that USA Jobs account and then you put it into this account differently, it's going to fall into what we call a mismatch documents error sort of on the back end of our system. So it affects the way that you apply for a job. And we have to kind of go through some systems checks to actually verify that you are the same person based on your name or that Social Security number. So it's important that you put the correct one in. All right, next page is the biographical data. As a new person signing in and creating an account again, has the biographical data, it will pre-populate for you from USA Jobs. So you don't have to put all that information in, although it might ask you for some additional things, but pretty much your home address, city and state, and all that information will be pre-populated for you. Now, the assessment questionnaires are divided into sections, and this is pretty much how they're going to all look. The top part is pretty standard, but the assessment questionnaires are divided into sections, and this particular one has 8 sections. Not every one of these jobs that you apply to will have 8 sections. Some might have 10, some might have fewer than 8. Each job is a little different. But this on the screen here gives you an example that we pretty much ask questions with a multiple choice response, and some of these jobs might have narrative text that we require from you. And we're not asking you for an essay. We're just asking for a brief description to help support the responses that you have indicated here. Okay, next slide. So we come to the next slide, which is our reused document slide. This reused documents are the documents that you uploaded into USA Jobs. They come over into the new system, waiting in here, this waiting status, until you decide whether you want to use this document that you uploaded, or you can upload your new document, which is next slide for me, Pam. Or you can choose to use the upload feature in the system. If you decided you didn't want to use that job, that resume that you uploaded on the USA Jobs, you can re-upload something totally different at this point. In addition to all those supporting documents such as the DD-214, the SF-50, all of that now can be done on this side of the house versus USA Jobs. Okay? Now, if you get into a situation where you just cannot upload your resume or 50 or anything, we have this fax cover page where you can just click at the bottom here. It says click here, and it will give you a cover page for faxing. This is a sort of the back way to get your application into the system. If you're unable to upload all the documents that you need, you can click on this box here and you can fax the documents to OPM. That phone number and fax number is listed in the How to Apply section of each one of our announcements, and you just fax those items to OPM, Macon, Georgia, and they will ensure that it's scanned in and that it matches up with your application package. Next slide. So once you get all the documents uploaded into the system, you're ready to go ahead and submit your answers for this application package. And it's important to hit this button, because if you don't hit it, we're going to see you in the system as an incomplete status, incomplete application, and that's not good. I mean, you've done all the questionnaire and you've uploaded all the documents that you need, and the last thing that you have to do is hit this button to make it all sync together. So it's important that you hit that button, submit your answers for this application package. And once you do that, you're going to get your next slide, which is your confirmation of submission. This is your first acknowledgement that your application was received. You get the first online screen that your application was received. And again, we have 4 points that we have to notify you, and this is the first one. Now, you can do one of two things. Once you get this on your screen, you can actually go back to the main menu of Application Manager. You can go back there and you can print your questionnaire off so that you have your responses. Or you can go back to USA Jobs Applicant Status. Next slide. So if you go back to USA Jobs Applicant Status, again, this is where we're referring all applicants to find out the status of your application. It's going to be listed under here, application status, and as you see on this slide here, it says applications received under application status, application received. Now, if you wanted to find out more information, we have a hyperlink here, more information. If you were to click that, it would give you the information from your application manager account. So if the HR specialist did send something out, such as you were referred, it would appear here as well. Okay. Now, we have put this tutorial on NAR at Work, and you can find it under this URL if you choose to go back to it and just refer back to it. We also have it on the Hiring Reform webpage. You can go there and you can just pull it back up if you need to. Now, at this point, what we normally do is we actually ask you if you have any questions about the application process that I may be able to answer for you.
Hi. My question would be, when you're loading or browsing to select your resume,
Yes.
how many pages or how much content can you put into the resume? Is there a certain number of words or?
No. No. As far as uploading the document, no. There is no limitation on the application manager side to restrict you from uploading a reasonable sized document.
Okay. And I don't know if this is more HR. What's a good rule of thumb for going back number of years for resume?
Put on the power. You don't have to go back a certain number of years, but you want to make sure that that resume reflects all the experience that you have that's related to the job that you're applying for. Years ago, you had to go back, 10, 20 years, but now that's not required. But essentially, like I said, you want to make sure that any experience that you have that's related to that job you're applying for, that it's reflected in your resume.
Okay.
Anything else? Any concerns about faxing? Okay. Oh.
You said reusable size limit. What is that in pages?
We don't really, there is no limitation in the system on the number of pages. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of examples of I've seen 10 to 12 page resume. And that was kind of lengthy for a resume. Yes, sir.
If you apply for a job under merit promotion, does it still go to Georgia?
If you upload your resume, that's where you're going to upload it to. The number that we're going to provide you sends it to Macon, Georgia.
Right. It doesn't matter which type of announcement you're applying for. If you need to fax documents, it's all going to go to the same place, and they're going to scan them in and upload them into USA Staffing and marry up the application materials.
And for the ones that actually have went through this process, did you find it easy, simple, faster? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've used it recently, and there was one little technical glitch. I thought it was my fault that I wasn't navigating through this, and I called the contact in St. Louis, and she quickly figured out that it wasn't me, it was the system,
Okay.
which I think is fairly unusual. They corrected it the same day, I believe, and added a week on the announcement, and I found it very easy to use. More easy, like I know you had to like do these slides and step people through it. It's actually much easier when you're sitting there at the system.
Absolutely. Yes.
Are you gonna get to I think you said something about how the system will score the application?
Yes. That's
I'm
coming
going
up.
About that next?
Yes.
I'm going to cover that in the next section.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'm going to let Pam finish this out.
Okay.
Sorry.
Grab my book. Okay, so now you've hit that button, submit my answers. What happens next? Okay, well, the first thing that's going to happen is that the USA staffing system is going to evaluate the responses that the applicant entered on the occupational questionnaire that deal with the minimum qualification requirements, the time and grade requirements, the area of consideration. These are essentially screen-out questions. So applicants are going to be evaluated on those first. If you don't meet the minimum qualification requirements, your application process stops at that point. If you're evaluated as meeting minimum qualifications, you have the time and grade requirement, if it applies, you're within the area of consideration, then the system is going to assign a score based on the responses to those task or competency-based questions. Okay, and essentially at that point, the system will generate a ranking list essentially of the best qualified candidates. And the first thing the HR specialist is going to do is to look and see if they have any of these mismatched documents that Roland was speaking about. Sometimes when applications are faxed in on the cover sheet, if someone doesn't show their name the same way, or if there's a hyphenated name or a name with an apostrophe, sometimes those will show up as mismatched documents that they will have to correct. Sometimes the social security numbers are transposed. So again, it's important if you're faxing all or part of your application that those match up. So that's the first thing they'll do. The next thing that they're going to do is to look at all those applications in the best qualified group and review those resumes of those candidates to determine that, in fact, the minimum qualification requirements are met. They're going to be reviewing the resumes. They're going to be reviewing transcripts if individuals are qualifying or on education, or if a certain type of education is required for a position. And again, that's why the resume is so very important, is because that's where they're going to gather the information for minimum qualifications. They can use information that's in the occupational questionnaire, such as information that you might have added in a mini narrative about examples of your work experience, but those mini narratives, again, should support the information that's already in your resume. And this essentially is where the first time savings and efficiencies come about with using USA Staffing. Because in the past, if we received, say for example, 150 applications for a position, the HR specialist would go through those 150 paper applications and evaluate all of those for minimum qualifications. The next step would be to probably convene a ranking panel or a subject matter expert to evaluate those applications against the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then again assign point levels. Comes back to the HR specialist who puts together the referral list. At this point, we already have the best qualified candidates. They've been scored on the responses to the occupational questionnaire, but we have to ensure that these candidates do meet the qualification requirements. Okay. The specialist, again, is going to review those SF-50 notification of personnel actions that you submitted to determine whether or not you're eligible, based on the type of announcement, to help verify things such as time and grade. They're also at this stage of the process going to adjudicate veterans preference claims. So they're going to be looking at DD-214s that have been submitted by applicants. They're going to be looking at SF-15 application for 10-point preference and the required supporting documents as well in order to adjudicate those veterans preference claims. Once that's taken place, the specialist is going to generate through the system the actual certificate of eligibles to the hiring manager. They're going to review that, and then they're going to transmit it to the hiring manager either electronically or in hard copy, depending on the manager's preference. We have had some managers already who have chosen to receive their whole package electronically. And there's a tool called Selection Manager, which will walk you as a hiring manager through the process. You'll be able to view your certificates. You'll be able to keep track of them. All of the active certificates for all of the jobs that you're recruiting for will be reflected on one main page. You'll be able to review applications, print them in preparation for job interviews that you're going to be holding. You'll also, at the end of the process, be able to annotate that certificate with the action taken on each of the applicants, whether you've selected a candidate, non-selected candidates. It's possible that some candidates have declined the position when they were contacted for an interview, or they maybe failed to reply to correspondence or emails that you've sent them trying to set up an interview. Okay, and then speaking of the interview is a very important part of the hiring process. It's the most widely used method of evaluating candidates for positions. It is even more important now because of having an automated rating and ranking system. Hiring managers are no longer going to have those lengthy KSA statements, which is going to tell about a lot of experience that the applicants have. A lot of information is put forth in those KSA narratives. So it's going to be important from the manager's side of the house because they're going to be using an interview and possibly a structured interview to gather that information from applicants. And as an applicant, it's going to be more important because all the manager has in front of them generally is your resume. That could be a 2 or 3 page document. We will also provide the manager with those mini narratives if they were asked in the questionnaire. But then this is going to be the applicant's opportunity to put forth what experience and education you have that you would bring to this job. Okay. We have recently revised the interview skills guide, which is out on the NARA website at NARA at Work. And if you just type in interview skills guide, it'll be the first hit that comes up and it'll be on the training site. And it has good information for both hiring managers and employees who are preparing for interviews, as well as some sample questions that might be helpful. And once interviews are conducted and the hiring manager has narrowed the list down to his or her one or two finalists, you should conduct reference checks. And we have some information on reference checks available in a new directive that we've issued on NARA 317, Merit Promotion and Internal Placement. This information is applicable regardless of how you're recruiting, whether it's merit promotion or public notice, and there are some sample questions that can be found there. OPM also has a reference checking guide, and we've included a link to that in NARA 317. And you can also access it by just searching on reference checking on the opm.gov site. Okay, and now as far as notifying applicants, as Roland indicated, under our traditional process, generally you would receive letters in the mail and or sometimes emails from the HR specialists at different points of the process telling you what the status of your application is. Sometimes this could take a couple of weeks. The referral list might already be out and you may have been contacted for an interview and a week later you received the letter that said your application was referred. Okay. We're now going to be doing all notifications by email and we're going to be directing you to that applicant status part of your USA Jobs account in order to receive that information. And as Roland said, you're going to receive your first notification when you apply for the job, that confirmation of submission message. You're going to receive a notice when you've been rated eligible or ineligible. You're going to receive a notice if you've been referred or not referred. And ultimately, you'll receive a notice of selected or not selected. Now, you will always be contacted by phone by an HR specialist if you are selected for the position. You may receive the follow-up email in your application account status account, but you will be contacted by an HR specialist if you've been selected for a position. And again, this is why it's so important that you have your email account when you are setting up your USA Jobs and USA Staffing accounts. You have your email address listed correctly. And I think one thing I forgot to mention regarding offers, the selecting official does have an opportunity to make informal job offers to the candidate they've selected if they so choose, but just keep in mind that the official offer comes from an HR specialist. Okay. And then how are we going to ensure the new process is working? Okay. First, most agencies have been using automated hiring systems effectively for a number of years. So there's quite a bit of information out there for us to tap into. NARA is one of the few agencies actually that did not have an automated staffing system. We chose USA Staffing, which has been in use in the federal government for approximately 11 years, has over 40 federal agency clients, and it's run by OPM and integrated with USA Jobs. That's another requirement of hiring reform, is all agencies' automated hiring systems, regardless of whether they're using Resumex or Quick Hire or USA Staffing or something other than that. They all have to integrate with USA Jobs. So the goal is, as of November, if you're looking for a job on USA Jobs, regardless of what agency it is, you should be able to use that Apply Online button to apply for the position, and it should integrate. It should take you to that agency's hiring system, just like it does with USA Staffing and takes you to Application Manager. And again, you should be able to receive your status updates through your USA Jobs account. We piloted the system for approximately a year before we purchased licenses for all of the HR specialists, and we had very positive results. We've been monitoring, or I should say we did monitor the progress of USA Staffing versus our traditional paper-based processes. And this chart shows a comparison for the period July 1 of 2009 to April 30, 10, when we were running both systems. And it essentially compares the numbers of announcements and the numbers of vacancies that were filled during this time. And as you can see from this chart, we posted 26 announcements during that time under USA Staffing because we were again in the pilot stage, but we received over 8,500 applications. We're under our traditional paper-based process, so we posted 142 announcements and received 3,500 applicants. So more than double the amount of applicants through USA Staffing. And we think that's, again, because the system is easier, quicker, no lengthy KSA narratives that need to be prepared. We also compared the selection rate and came up with, we had 81% hires made under USA Staffing announcements compared to 75% under our traditional process. And we've also established metrics for time to fill based on OPM's end-to-end 80-day hiring model. In 2009, one of the areas of hiring reform that we were required to do was to map our hiring processes against this 80-day model. And we've established metrics to measure the average time to post an announcement, the average time to issue a certificate, and the average time to make a job offer, as well as our overall time to hire average. And you'll see under USA Staffing, the time for each of those processes was less. And for this period of time, our average time to hire under USA Staffing was 136 days compared to 165. And as of, for fiscal year 2010, we're at 118 days on average to fill a job compared to 163 to 213 days in July of 2009. So there's already been significant improvement. And finally, NARA has invested in a significant amount of training and has also added new staff to NAH to ensure that we're making this transition smoothly and effectively. We've hired Roland as our USA Staffing Manager. He's very knowledgeable of the system, used it extensively at Customs and Border Patrol, where they've had the system in use for several years. We've also hired, as I said, an industrial organizational psychologist who specializes in different types of assessments, and he's going to be helping us going forward with such items as structured interviews. All HR staff attended a week of training given by US OPM specialist in the use of the system, and that was followed up by a week of training with the systems manager and with the organizational psychologist on preparing announcements, marketing positions, and preparing assessments. And then lastly, we have developed some guides and tools and templates for the staff to use. I'm sure you've noticed in announcements that there's a lot of language that is standardized, and so we've developed templates for those announcements, whether it be NARA only, government-wide, or public notice, again to improve efficiencies, and the specialist only has to enter the information that's changing. We've also standardized and tailored some of those screen-out questions regarding area of consideration and time and grade. So that essentially covers the briefing, but I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Sure.
Who writes the questionnaire questions?
Okay, the specialist starts out by drafting the questionnaire, and they're using existing job analysis and crediting plans that we've used to fill the job in the past. If we filled that job within the last year or two, for the most part, that information is probably still accurate, but they're going to be checking with the hiring manager first before they get started to make sure there's nothing major that's happened. It's then going to be reviewed by the industrial organizational specialist, more commonly known to us as Jamie. It's a lot easier to say. And he will be reviewing that along with the materials that the specialist had to work from and reviewing it for validity, content. Like I said, if he feels that maybe it needs to be, it's not addressing all the requirements of the job, he gives turnaround on those is approximately 24 hours. So it's a very good turnaround that he'll give his comments and suggestions and possibly work with the specialist on making some improvements. And at that point, it'll be sent to the hiring manager. But it's not a done deal at that point. The hiring manager then is going to be reviewing it for the requirements that they're looking for in the job and working with the HR specialist to fine-tune and turn it into the final product.
Can you just go over a little bit what you mean by a structured interview?
Okay, a structured interview essentially is where all candidates, you have a structured interview guide that's been developed, and you've identified skills or competencies that you're going to evaluate in that structured interview, and you've developed those questions, and you've developed rating criteria based on the responses that you would be looking for applicants. So all applicants are going to be asked the same exact questions and evaluated against the same criteria. Now, some applicants may talk more than other applicants. Some, it's like pulling teeth to get them to respond to questions. So there may be some additional probe questions that the interviewer would ask to try and draw out that information that they need, okay? They also are able, the hiring manager may ask questions about something in particular that's in an applicant's resume that relates directly to that skill or competency that's being evaluated. Generally, you have more than one person in a structured interview because you have one person running the interview and one person taking notes. Okay? And at the end of the interview process, essentially, they'll assign a score to the interview. And again, the focus or the purpose of the structured interview is everyone is asked the same questions. Everyone is evaluated against the same response scale. And I'll just go one step further in case I might get the question. Right now, we are not requiring managers to select the individual who received the top score on the interview because the interview is just another stage of the hiring process. The first hurdle is getting on the certificate, meeting the best qualified. The next hurdle, if you will, would be through the interview process. But the manager has the application package. It's a guide. It should be a very good guide at the end to show you who the top candidates are for that position to help make your selection. Any other questions? Back in the corner?
Yes, on the scoring of the occupational questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is what you're looking for is whether somebody, for each of the questions, whether somebody says they have experience in this, and then whether that experience is through education or employment.
They
Well-
can, yes, each section can be weighted different, or they can be equally weighted. But yes, when you're answering the response, it may ask you if you've done something in a work environment, or it may ask if you've done it in an educational environment, or either, as far as the
Well,
responses.
And I mean,
Oh,
no, that's what I was going to address. For that particular question, we do not weight that question.
Okay.
We consider that an eligibility question. So
No.
you will be determined eligible or ineligible based
Right.
on your responses to that question.
I think the question is more on the task-based questions, where you have the listing of choices that you can select from. It says, I've performed this task, I've been trained in this task, I've performed this task, I help others in the performance of this task. And I think the question is, can you choose those answers whether you have done this in an academic environment or in a work environment?
Okay.
And the answer is yes.
Okay. And in the final, just to bring mine back, the question I was referring to is the minimum quals question. Okay,
I'm asking the actual task-based things.
gotcha.
So that somebody who has had experience is versus somebody who's only done this in an educational setting, potentially could be scored equally.
Potentially, but it is all going to hinge on the minimum qualification requirement. You could have a position, say, at the grade 12 level. You can't substitute education for experience at the grade 12 level. So it's possible that that individual who has completed a high level of education is not going to clear the minimum quals question to even get to the questionnaire, because there is no substitution of education for experience at the grade 12 level. So the person is going to have some type of experience, specialized experience that's equivalent to the grade 11 level in the federal service to meet the minimum qualification requirements. And then assuming that is so, then the questions that they're responding to, it's going to be more than likely that they have performed that task in a work environment. Yes?
Somewhat hinges on that same thing. Sometimes people's self-understanding of what they've done is not actually in line with, in particular, I have supervised people. Because I've seen people who think they have supervised when they have not officially had that responsibility. And so I'm afraid some of these questions, people can kind of inflate their experience in the questionnaire.
That's highly possible. And we talk with applicants all the time, and our guidance to them is that you should look closely at what the question is, what's being required, look closely at what your experience is, and select the area that best fits the proficiency level that you have. Now, I will tell you, if an applicant, if the responses on the questionnaire do not support what is in the resume, the HR specialist can override the score that was assigned and lower that applicant's score to the next lower grouping. So say, for an example, we're filling a policy level job, and there are all kinds of questions about your writing and have you written policy and at what level. And an individual has listed that, this is the main part of their job and they're the main person in the office that does this, but there's absolutely nothing in their resume that they have anything to do with even writing SOPs at the local level or policy. Right there, they're probably not, if it's a policy level job, they're probably not in the best qualified group. It really doesn't happen that often, but again, we have a couple of checks and balances. I guess the first thing is, you really need to pay attention to that little check mark about everything is true to the best of your knowledge in your application package. You really should be as honest as possible, and I think most applicants, for the most part, what I've seen, they're very honest about what they have done. They need to sometimes be careful about being too humble about what they've done. And the interview is really the final checks and balances. When it gets to the hiring manager and that person made it through, we saw it in the resume, we saw it in the occupational questionnaire, and they're in the top group, and they are unable to respond to the questions that are being asked. There's your third checks and balance, and essentially they probably will not be selected for the position. That, again, is why the interview is so important now that we're in this automated environment. Any other questions in the back?
If I understood you correctly, veterans preference will continue to be maintained going forward?
Yes, for public notice announcements. Veterans preference does not apply for merit promotion announcements, those that say open to NAR employees with career or career conditional status. But yes, on public notice, veterans preference applies.
And did I understand you correctly that we won't continue to be in a situation where we have a handful of veterans that block hiring manager from seeing other qualified applicants?
Essentially, no. That's if that's the way it come across, that's not what I meant to say. Essentially, what will happen is, in this best qualified group, there may be candidates that have veterans preference and those that do not. All of these candidates are going to have been rated on the same criteria, and they're going to have fallen within the same score band to be determined in the best qualified group. But there aren't going to be any additional points that are added to an application of an individual with veterans preference to move them into that highest category. They're going to have gotten there on their own merits. But once they're in that highest qualified category, they will be listed at the top of their certificate ahead of the individuals without preference. And you will not be able to select an individual that doesn't have preference over one that does. So veterans preference still applies. It's just that, oftentimes I think managers were caught up in the rule of three, which sometimes became the rule of one. An individual with preference might have been the top candidate on the list, followed by 2 individuals with veterans preference. And the question I always get is, I'm supposed to have a selection from 3 candidates. Well, you have got 3 candidates. Essentially, though, it was the rule of 1 because you were not able to bypass an individual with veterans preference. So in this case, you're most likely going to always receive more than 3 candidates for a position, but we still do have to apply the rules of veterans preference.
And if none of those veterans were in the first choice, what would be the post-election?
Well, essentially what you would need to do is to document what it is that the candidates on your list do not have that you're looking for, and probably talk with your HR specialist. Maybe there's something you're looking for that is a requirement of the job that wasn't in the position description. Maybe that needs to be revised. Maybe it's something that you didn't ask, we didn't ask enough questions about, or the right question, or maybe we need to tailor some of the questions and you need to ask to repost the position. But again, you would need to identify what is it that these candidates don't have that we were asking for. Otherwise, there's not a lot we can do about it. Bob?
My understanding is the list of referred candidates to a selected official all must be interviewed, or at least an attempt must be made to interview them.
No, that's not correct. Essentially, the hiring managers make the decision on which candidates are going to be interviewed. Needs to be based on job-related criteria that's required on entry into the position. Now, for a bargaining unit job, if as a hiring manager you choose to select one bargaining unit employee, then you must interview all bargaining unit employees. But that does not apply to non-bargaining unit. But again, the key is job-related criteria required for entry into the job. What does this group of candidates have that makes you want to interview them as opposed to this group of candidates that you have just determined you're not going to interview? What experience are they lacking that this group has that's necessary to do your job? In the back?
You mentioned score bands.
Mhm.
How are those bands determined before things are scored?
Yes, we have some predetermined score bands. It's definitely all done in the process of developing the announcement and the assessment. It's all built into the system before the vacancy announcement is posted. That they're predetermined.
Just curious, you gave a lot of information, which is pretty impressive, about more applicants applying, speed, and all that. Since this has been running, has there been any feedback of the quality of the people that you managers are receiving as opposed to the old system? I mean, obviously you have a lot more people coming through. Are they finding the quality the same, or is that even been really looked at?
Well, we have instituted some customer service surveys that have been sent out to the hiring managers. We really don't have any solid information of statistics at this point. But from what I gather from specialists that have been working with the hiring managers, there's been positive reaction and response to using the system. And we've been able to make more selections. Nothing else? Okay, well, I want to thank you all for your time this afternoon. And as a last order of business, if you would not mind filling out the evaluation form for us, letting us know if there's any additional information that we could add to the briefing or to make it more comprehensive. And you can leave them on the table in the hall on the way out. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.